Welcome back, guys. We have another fantastic episode for you today. Today, we're clearing the way for better health. So some episodes are about adding things in. This episode is about what we need to clean out before we start adding things in to look, feel, and be our best. Before I jump into that, I, of course, would love to invite you to check out Niddam.com. And that is where you will find out information about how to sign up for my newsletter, which comes out maybe 2 to 3 times a week. The Sunday newsletter is the big one. And then sometimes we send out a couple of others during the week. And if you are someone who is super interested in peptides, then you're going to want to actually pick also the option of the peptide newsletter. So there's the regular newsletter, and then there's also a peptide specific newsletter. So you can make your choice from there. If you're a new subscriber to my newsletter these days, you're also going to get an 8-part series that is all about lifestyle strategies to optimize your body, get yourself kind of back up to homeostasis so that then you can start kind of optimizing beyond that. So that's a feature in the newsletter these days, today. And then last but not least, if you want to hang out with me, make sure that you check out the community and think about joining my community, Longevity with Nat, which we are now hosting on a platform called Circle, which is amazing. It is private and it is phenomenal. And you not only do you get to do regular live Q&As with me, but I also get a bunch of my podcast guests to come in and do live Q&As as well. So you get to get up close and personal with them too. So if you're interested in that, you can find everything that I just talked about at natniddam.com. Now, last but not least, please make sure that if you're feeling inspired by this episode, you leave us a review, because it's those reviews that allow us to be found. And if you know of anybody else who would get benefit from this episode, make sure that you share it with them. Before you try another detox, listen to this. There's a reason detoxing doesn't always work the way you expect it to. If your body is overloaded with stress and missing key nutrients, no amount of supplements or sauna sessions is really going to fix it. Today's guest, Dr. Jessica Peatross, knows this better than anyone. I met Dr. Peatross at a conference we both presented at a couple of years ago, and she is a firecracker. She's just amazing. You guys are going to love her. She's a former hospitalist turned functional medicine expert. She left conventional medicine after her own health struggles led her to uncover the deeper roots of chronic illness. She's the creator of the Kill, Bind, Sweat method and founder of the Wellness Plus app, helping thousands of patients heal from Lyme disease, mold toxicity, and hormone imbalances. In this episode, we're talking about why regulating your nervous system should come before any detox, how trauma depletes your minerals, and what you can do to start feeling better now. It's time for a smarter approach to health, so let's get into it. Hey folks, just a quick reminder that all of the information presented in this podcast is for information purposes only. No medical advice, no diagnosing, no treatments suggested here. Before you try anything that you hear about or learn about here, make sure that you check with your medical provider. Welcome to the show, Dr. Jess Peatross. It is such a pleasure to see you again.
Thank you so much for having me. It's my honor.
Oh, yeah. And mine. When's the last? Well, when we met in Sarasota.
We did not that long ago, actually, and I loved your talk.
Oh, thank you. Well, I loved yours. Wasn't it? When was it? Was it in the spring?
It's April, late April. Yeah.
It feels like a million years ago, doesn't it? Time is just spinning out, sister. Anyway, I'm thrilled we made this happen. So, because I'm so excited about our topic for today. I mean, obviously you have many, many topics you speak on, and I know that parasites is one, and mold and all the things, but we're going to get under that today, or ahead of it, or behind it, or however we want to say to it, because I think that, and I'm going to invite you a little bit to share about, some of the reasons why you're really leaning into this aspect, which I think intuitively a lot of us are moving towards this whole terrain theory. And for those of you who are listening who haven't heard about terrain theory, really it's about optimizing the body first, optimizing the environment that you're going to be creating for healing, right? So Dr. Jess, over to you.
Yes, absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about.
about terrain theory and versus germ theory. I think everyone's familiar with germ theory. And I want to say before I start talking about either of these that, any of us who are out there who believe in, let's say, terrain theory still would not necessarily have unprotected sex with someone we knew that had a sexually transmitted disease. That's germs, because we know that, right? So I integrate both of these, but lately in my career, I have come to find terrain theory be much overlooked, if you will. And that, let me just break it down, because I'm all about inclusive speech for people, and I don't want to trigger anyone with the two divisive terms here. Mm-hmm. So really what terrain theory came from is Antoine Beauchamp, back in the day, actually said the germ is nothing, the milieu is everything. And what he believed is that, if you have a dirty fish tank, then it's going to grow germs. If you have a dirty pond, it will attract mosquitoes. And the same is true of the body, because we are part of the ecosystem out there. So if you're full of things like industrial man-made toxins that aren't native to Earth and humans in their evolutionary development in general, or you have, anything, plastics, pesticides, any of those things inside, heavy metals, these are going to be a problem for how healthy and resilient the system will be to standing up to other frenemies or intruders that fill our toxin bucket. And the way terrain theory goes is that if you're full of toxins or trauma, you may have problems with recurrent infections, because they're there to digest organic material. So if you have waste putrefying in your stomach, mm-hmm. there might be some problems there with pathogens that are there to digest that for you. And so perhaps we blamed the pathogen or microbe a lot more than what we should have.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned something that I think bears digging into a little bit, and you mentioned trauma as one of those things that can really disrupt your body's ability to deal. And I think at the end of the day, this is what we're saying. We're saying if the body is not balanced and healthy, it doesn't have what it needs to function properly, you're going to end up being much more susceptible to the germs, and whether it's germs or viruses, whatever you want to call it, you're just going to be less resilient. Your defenses are going to be down, as it were. And I love that you said the piece about, look, germs are still a thing. Like, you don't want to be stupid. You can have the healthiest terrain on the planet. If you go jumping into a bucket of toxins, you're probably going to overwhelm the system. And some germs are pretty darn powerful. So we still have to exercise good judgment. But at the same time, if we've taken the time and gone to the trouble of emptying that bucket of stressors, and I'd love you to lean a little bit into how trauma feeds into this, but if we can reduce the load in our bucket, as it were, it leaves a lot more room for the body to kind of maneuver when it does get challenged. So let's talk a little bit about the trauma thing, because, emotions are a thing.
They're a thing, absolutely. And they do affect the physical body. And there's a book I love called The Body Keeps the Score that I think everyone should pay attention to and read out there possibly, because it really enlightens us as to how the body does keep the score. And I truly believe that from what I've seen in my clients and patients and in my own personal story, which we might get into in a bit. So yes, I classify trauma as sort of a toxin in the body. And let me give a little bit of scientific backing to that. So one study that people are pretty familiar with is the Adverse Childhood Events score, mm-hmm. and the ACE score, which changes the way our body puts methylation tags on our DNA. And actually, in one study showed that the more adverse childhood events you had, the higher the score, the higher the risk of autoimmunity and hospitalization from that autoimmunity. And so we see that it does change the way our body releases hormones and neurotransmitters and neuropeptides and even blood sugar regulation. All of our neuroendocrine system is affected in the autonomic nervous system dysregulation or sympathetic overdrive, which is what happens when we're traumatized. Mm-hmm. You can look at, especially, the worst cases of trauma, some severe PTSD like veterans, and see how much it affects their neurobiology. And so this is kind of a new, I think, cutting edge area of science. There's actually a new study published that shows you can get an emotional traumatic brain injury from narcissistic abuse long term.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Absolutely.
It makes sense, right? I mean, if you fall, and I've known a couple of people who have fallen into the sphere of someone has that powerful personality and is pretty toxic. And it affects every single aspect of their ability to function, both emotionally, cognitively, and physically. And it is, and I think it should come as no big surprise because of the power. We are recognizing increasingly the power of the mind. When people talk about the placebo effect, and there's two camps in the world. People will go, oh well, that's just placebo effect, and other people go, oh, wow, that was placebo effect. That's really cool. Let's find out how that person did that, right? Yeah. Honoring the fact that somehow the mind was able to deliver physiological benefits from something that actually technically doesn't exercise physiological benefits. Yes. So, I think that this area of study is so important. And, you get people like Joe Dispenza who go so far as to do work with people where they achieve shocking reversals of states of disease. You're one of them? Okay.
I'm one of them. That story is my story, actually.
All right, let's talk about that, because I think it's we mustn't dismiss it. It doesn't mean necessarily that you can just sit there and think away your crazy, some horrible physical issue. And yet I'm increasingly coming to the conclusion that without getting the mind online, as it were, we're going to have to work a lot harder, and sometimes we may be less successful. So let's hear about your experience.
1,000%. Just to drive that point home, a lot of the nervous system dysregulation I see is causing most of the histamine problems and mast cell activation things I see in women as well. Stress.
What a hot point that is.
Yes, absolutely, right now. So for me, I actually had a really rough last few years. The last 4 years, I think there was a lot of collective trauma within all of us. And then there was some personal trauma and things that happened to me as well. I was sued by shareholders. It's a long story. I surrendered my medical license for doing childhood vaccine exemptions in California. There was a lot of things that happened to me. And then my 6-year relationship actually ended abruptly. And so all of that sort of happened at once. It's a lot. It was a lot. Oh, and I went through it. And so I ended up gaining a bunch of weight. I'm in my 40s now, perimenopausal, right at that right time with there's trauma involved. It's almost like the perfect storm. So inflammation just explodes. And that's what happened to me. Cortisol made my waist thicker, right in the abdomen. I mean, cortisol is a nasty hormone when it's out of control. It changed. I mean, I had asymmetry in my eyes. My left eye was higher and smaller than the other. And that was due to the emotional traumatic brain injury and the lack of B vitamins, because I was stripped of my minerals. I was stressed so long. Started dumping them out of my kidneys, potassium, magnesium, all that stuff that you need for your nervous system to really stay in homeostasis and in balance. And when that started happening, I had emotional mood swings. I couldn't not be irritated. I mean, it was really bad. I embarrassed myself a couple times. And then
you're sitting there reacting to something, and then there's the other part of you going, are we really doing this right now?
Yeah, it's totally what happened. I mean, I relate so much to these, perimenopausal women who can't control their emotions, who feel pulled in a million different directions. That was me. And I finally said, okay, I'm acting like I don't know what to do. I need to go get some labs. Come on. So
I'm a physician. I can do this.
It's you. Why is it so much harder? So I get some labs, and I actually opened up the labs on my phone while I was sitting at a week-long Joe Dispenza event.
Oh, you're kidding.
I promise. And my dear friend Jill was sitting next to me, and I just started crying. And she said, first of all, why are you looking at your phone during Joe Dispenza? And second of all, she said, why are you crying? And I said, look, everything's in the red. Everything. It was in the red on my CBC. My MCV was 106. Everything was high. I mean, my CRP, which is a non-specific measure of inflammation, it should have been less than 3. It was 8. My vitamin D was, I think, 19. My iron was 8. So you
were completely depleted.
Completely depleted. And that's how I felt. So, you wonder what causes, asymmetry in the face and that your bones in your cranium to actually shift and change. It's a lack of mineralization, literally a brain injury, because you can't make neurotransmitters or hormones. You can't synthesize DNA and make red blood cells. You can't. I mean, they actually told me it looked like I had cancer or polycythemia vera. It scared me to death.
Yeah. Yeah,
so
that's pretty scary.
I'm sitting there at Joe Dispenza. It's the first or second day. And I'm like, okay, this is really terrible news, but I have an opportunity here.
Mm-hmm.
And
you're in the right place.
Right. That's what all my friends said to me. You're in the right place. And specifically, my friend Kelly Kennedy said that exactly. And so I sat there and I said, okay, I'm going to focus on exactly what he tells me to do to manifest this. I'm going to exactly heal myself while I'm here. Even if it manifests 3 weeks, 3 months, down the road, I'm going to do it here. Because I'm here because I believe this.
Yeah.
That the mind plays a role in our physical health. And so I focused on all those hormones on my labs that were messed up. My insulin growth factor was really low too. I focused on all of those minerals that were missing. And I went out and I Instacarted a good B vitamin, methylated B vitamin complex.
Yeah.
And
so the physical in addition to.
And that's actually how you heal yourself and other people. You have to address all the mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical in the person, and like a phoenix rising. I mean, it was like when I took those B vitamins that it was like Pleasantville, where the movie goes from black and white to color. Ah, that's what happened. I couldn't believe how, and my friend said, wow, you were really getting on my nerves because you were so victimized. You're like a different person now. I couldn't believe it. And it was that fast for my mood. I was having neuropsychiatric symptoms. I was suicidal last year.
Wow. You know what I love about this, and this is where I think we really need to pay attention to this, in that there's a certain degree of supplementation that we do to shore up defenses, to make sure that we're, just to make sure. But when you're really truly depleted in something and you provide it to the body, that's when that's when you really experience what replenishment to the body systems can really feel like. And often, sometimes for some people, they have no clue how bad they were feeling until they turn that around and realize, holy crap, I had no idea how crappy I felt, because I feel so much better now.
I mean, the people around me saw it. I didn't see it as well, so, but man, I mean, you need B vitamins to take iron. And, I thought, gosh, I have this traumatic brain injury, so my gut's inflamed too. I could, tell from some of my bowel movements, which were really inflamed and loose and everything, that I had this gut brain axis, like brain on fire, gut on fire type of thing. And so I made sure that I got my minerals and vitamins. I actually went out and got nutrition IVs for about 2 months after that, with methylated B vitamins added and glutathione, to be sure that I was absorbing everything. And then my first supplement that I created recently is methylated B vitamins, vitamin C, and glutathione, because I see how important it was for me. And I'll tell you what, Dr. Nat, I manifested. I'll tell you what, I manifested my health. You might as well be. You know more than doctors. So.
No, I don't. And I'm not a doctor. So,
okay.
Everybody.
I'm sorry. I'll stop.
It's okay.
Nat.
But thank you.
Yes. But Nat, yes. I actually manifested my health there, because a month later.
Okay, so talk to us about that.
Yes.
Talk to us about the power, like what the work that you did with the mind to get, to optimize those bees and to give them a place to anchor and to do their thing.
We would sometimes have 3 to 5 hour meditations, and he would put, the 3D picture of a neuropeptide, on the board, like growth hormone, for example, rotated in a 3D formation for us and say the name of it. That's all you needed in all the objective studies to be able to change that hormone's trajectory in your body. And so I started doing that with insulin-like growth factor. I started doing that with growth hormone. I started doing that with all my anterior pituitary. I started to take his, not just him, but all the great people who teach you how to manifest. I started to follow those steps. What do I want the outcome to look like? How can I get excited about when I see these labs and what I want to see? How excited will I be? And I had to feel that emotion. I had to feel the emotion of what it would feel like to be healthy. What would the new Jess feel like? I can't stay in that old pattern anymore. I can't victimize myself anymore. I have to feel like, what would it be like if I shifted this whole paradigm and I actually got good news? I've been protecting myself, kind of imagining worst case scenario, so if it happened, I wouldn't be disappointed.
Wow. Yeah, that's powerful, right? Because now all of a sudden you're focusing on the negative. It's a little bit when you're driving a car. If you focus on that wall, guess where you're going?
Right. And that's what I had been doing. And you
Yeah.
know, I blew my whole life up actually that way. Actually. So I could see it all at that point. And 3 weeks to 4 weeks later, I got new labs and barely anything was in the red. There was a couple things that were in the yellow that were improving. Like my MCV wasn't all the way better yet on my CBC, but everything else, I mean, my CRP was normalized, completely normalized. And that's one of the things they talked about on Dr. Joe's events and all the objective studies that they were getting ready to publish, is that people really turned their inflammation around. They really turned that around.
Well, so two things. Now, one, I will mention that I have an episode that will have aired by the time this airs from a company that measures mitochondrial function.
I
with
know
the
who
blood
it is,
test.
I think.
You know who it is.
I do know who it is.
They were at a Joe Dispenza event recently,
yes.
right? Did you talk to them? And so what they did is they measured people's mitochondrial function before the event. And then they measured their mitochondrial function after the event. And the scientist, Himal Patel, said to me, I was calling bullshit on this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I'm a scientist. There's no freaking way people are going to think their mitochondria to be better. And he's like, we were floored by the results.
All the results. I cry when they show them. It's like...
It's unbelievable. The only thing he said, you know, what remains to be seen is how long does it last, right? Will it last 2 weeks? Will it last a month? Does it depend on how much the person really commits to this work on an ongoing basis?
Correct.
So, but the fact that even if you could do it in an instant, like even if you could do it over a week and feel better and be better for a week, imagine the, you know, the positive fallout from a health perspective for you. So that was one thing that I think is amazing, and your inflammation going down is remarkable, right?
Yeah.
Because it's such a driver of everything, of so many other things. But you've mentioned MCV a few times, and so for the members of the audience who don't know what that is and why it's important, maybe let's unpack that a little bit for them, so that when next time they're looking at their labs and their blood work specifically, and they see that MCV number and it's in the red, you understand why it's important to you.
Absolutely. So if you guys look at your complete blood cell count, your CBC, you'll see your red cell distribution with RDW. You'll see your MCV, which is mean corpuscular volume. You'll see your mean platelet volume. You'll see your MCHC. There's a bunch of like acronyms there that stand for things. And they're really looking at the size and the volume and the distribution of your red blood cells. Are they all the right size? And, you know, if you have very small red blood cells, it's called microcytic anemia, usually due to like iron deficiency. If you have very big red blood cells like I did, that is due to a lack of folate and B12. So I could not make or synthesize any new red blood cells to carry hemoglobin to oxygenate all my tissues, including my brain, which is part of my problem.
Yeah. And so you get these oversized cells that are not functioning properly.
Correct.
And, you know, it's interesting because in the body, there's a number of cells that happens to. Apparently, even your fat cells get bigger as we age and more dysfunctional. And so how fascinating, right? So this MCV, and it's directly related. This is why Dr. Jess was talking about B vitamins, because it's directly related to that B vitamin status, your B6 and your B12. And I would love to invite you to speak to a little bit about how the deficiency of one can mask the deficiency of the other. And so people run around only supplementing with B12 because they heard it's good. And they don't pay attention to B6 and B9 and realize those three little horsemen need to be in balance and together so that we have healthy blood cells.
Absolutely. That's so, so important. I always encourage people to take a B complex so you get the proper ratios of things. B6 is actually really, really, really important for anterior pituitary function. It helps lower prolactin levels, actually.
Wow.
Yes. In patients who have schizophrenia, who are given antipsychotic medication, which can increase prolactin, B6 can actually lower it along with vitamin E. So beautiful. It also helps all the different anterior hormones, including FSH and estrogen regulation, including growth hormone as well. So, and you know, they're really needed in certain ratios. So if you guys are looking out there and you're listening, there are a lot of people who can't handle methylated B vitamins. they get scared about B12 and folate and B6 even. Make sure you're doing P5P and B6, the more natural type, so you don't get B6 toxicity. And make sure that you're doing, if you can't do methylated B vitamins, look into adenosine or hydroxycobalamin as well. Those are people who have a different genetic type that sometimes can't handle it as much.
Yeah, and I love that you said a different genetic type.
Yes.
The other word that I hear too much of is, what's the word people use? I've trained myself so much not to say this word.
You don't remember it now.
What's the word that people use? I use variant or different genetic type instead of not polymorphism. Like, it's a very negative.
Oh, like homozygous, and you're like terrible MTHFR. No.
It'll come back to, I can't believe it's escaping me. Clearly, I didn't have enough of something this morning.
That's okay. No worries. No worries.
But people talk about having terrible things in their DNA,
Yes.
and it's like, there's no terrible.
A mutation.
That's
yes.
Right?
Yes.
You're not a mutant. You just have a different variation. You process things differently, and awareness is everything.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, you guys, genes are not a death sentence. The environment signals the genes. So if you can, look at me. I look like a different person than I did last year. Trust me when I tell you that just because you have, maybe your MTHFR is really bad right now, or your COMT is slow and you don't know what you're going to do, you think it's a death sentence, that can be turned off. If you can turn them negative, you can turn them positive.
100%. Or you can compensate. You can compensate. But let's talk about the power of the mind that affects the expression of your genes, because this, again, is something that's been documented. There's actual documentation that speaks to, and this is Joe Dispenza's work, and I don't think he's the only one that does this, but speaking to how powerful the mind is, because the mind is essentially, from the inside, a massive epigenetic influencer on how your genes function.
1000%. How could it not be when we think about it? A thought, if you can think about something your boss did that made you so angry, and by the time you get to work, you're like slamming your car door, slamming doors shut. For us to not think that there aren't certain neuropeptides and neurotransmitters being released from neurons, from nerve cells continuously. And the more you think these continuous thoughts, whether they be negative or positive, your neurons start to fire in a rut, like a truck stuck in the mud. And then that becomes not just a belief system, it becomes a habit, which turns into a personality. It carves out over time. So absolutely, what you think releases certain neurotransmitters, neuropeptides, and the whole body talks. So, this is air traffic control.
Yeah.
So this is what tells our thyroid to release hormones, our ovaries to release estrogen, so many different things here that it's connected to, our adrenals to release cortisol. So if you're constantly thinking fearful, negative thoughts, you're going to have a cortisol overload. Cortisol is what caused all my belly fat.
Yeah, 100%. And cortisol is catabolic, right? So cortisol is a hormone that drives breakdown, which is fine sometimes, but not all the time. And does Dr. Joe speak to the heart center at all? Because we talk about the mind and it's not in our brain, but let's say the mind, your head mind. We talk about the gut brain, right? Because we have a brain in our gut, we have that gut and we have a gut brain connection. But in between those two is this other center that I think is massively important to our emotional regulation and how we operate in the world. And maybe I would love to invite you to speak about this a little bit. You've got this beautiful smile on your face, and I know you're like bursting.
I love what you're saying right now so much. So yes, one thing that Dr. Joe talks a lot about, and not just Dr. Joe, my friends all talk about this too. They're all in love with it. But there is actually neurocardiac center, neurocardiac neurons within that connect to the brain, and actually there is a whole system that's connected, right? So when you connect what we want to see is heart and mind coherence. We're connecting the heart to the mind. So I'll give you guys an example, and I'll use myself as the example here. So one thing that I really want now that I've been single for a year and a half is the love of my life to show up. I want a soulmate, soul, that type of deep soul love. But I'm really scared because I've gone through a lot of trauma. So even though my heart really wants that, my head often will be like, oh, it's not possible. I'm not going to meet that person. What I want is too much. And so there isn't mind and heart coherence here.
Right. They're not on the same page.
Exactly. So sometimes when people say that, it's like, what does that mean? And I wanted to explain it, and so that's what it means, is that you have a different belief system than possibly what your heart wants. And so to really get and manifest that, you have to have full heart and mind coherence where the sine waves are together as one, right? The energy is flowing. And without that, you kind of shoot yourself in the foot with the manifestation, if you will. You don't really get what you want, which is clear in my life with romance right now. I'm using myself as an example.
Well, your mind is trying to keep you safe.
Absolutely.
Right? The heart only knows what the heart knows, but the mind is sitting there saying, you know what, we've been hurt. We're not going back there again. So yeah, heart, you may want this, but here's the thing. Our goal is to keep Jess safe. We want safety above all. And if we don't think that it's possible to find that partner who will offer safety as well as love, then we're cutting you off at the knees. Right?
Yeah.
Can we, but maybe we can, there's a really interesting tool out there that's actually very inexpensive that can help you to practice this coherence. And I don't know if you've had it, I'm sure you've had experience with it, called the Heart Math.
Yes.
It's from the Heart Math Institute, which is the coolest little low-tech thing that very few people talk about. Like, we've got all these gizmos right now. We can zap our vagus nerve. We can vibrate your chest. So your and a lot of these things are fantastic. Don't get me wrong. But this is a little tool where you've got an ear clip. All it is, it's an ear clip. It connects to your phone. There's a few different graphics you can choose from. There's a little color wheel. You're trying to get yourself into the green, and all you're doing is breathing and thinking. I mean, the way I do it is I think of a happy place, right? And one of the things I think about is when my son was born, he was in the NICU for 3 months. And so what I would do every single day is I would go in there, I'd put him on my chest, like we do skin to skin therapy, because I was helping him to regulate his nervous system, because for a long time, his heart would forget to beat, or he would forget to breathe, and we'd have to run over and wake him up and the whole 9 yards. But whenever he was on me, which is where he technically should have been, right? Because he was born 3 months early, we co-regulated. So whenever I want to practice my coherence, I go back there, and it's like I instantly shoot back into the green. It's very cool, but it's a great practice, and it doesn't take very long.
That's beautiful. Actually, it was beautiful. Yeah. I love that. Yes.
Yeah. It was, because you're sitting there, I'm going to think of a happy place. And I was like, when's that time that I really felt connected like that? And that goes back a long time now.
Yeah. That's a profound experience. So
yeah. It's very powerful.
Yes.
Anyway, so the Heart Math Institute does some really, we've been blowing Joe Dispenza's horn this whole podcast. You don't have to stop your life necessarily until you're ready to kind of go into that deep dive. You can just, I think the gizmo is maybe $120 or something the last time I looked.
Much more affordable.
Well, and it's a little less of a commitment, and it kind of allows you to kind of take a step into that world. But let's go back to what we started talking about, also the whole aspect of remineralization, because minerals is a big hot topic. They're spark plugs to our cells. Like, not a whole lot's going to happen in the body without them. Because of it. I would love you to dig a little bit deeper into how this extreme state of stress essentially burned through your minerals, and you weren't able to replenish them. And so that, again, left your nervous system super compromised.
Absolutely. Well, for years now, I think I was sort of known as the detox doctor, drainage detox. And so I was, for most of my career, have been what I would call a subtractionist, which means people are usually ill because of what's stuck inside their body that doesn't belong there. Okay. So I was constantly working the natural drainage pathways, the bowels, the liver, the bile, the sweat pathway, which meant, I was in the sauna a lot. And
Taking
then,
things away. Yeah.
yeah, which would be great if you're stable and you're in a
Mm-hmm.
homeostasis. But for the last, 4 or 5 years, I've had some very traumatic things happen throughout my life, in my career, in my personal life. And I ended up with the diagnosis of CPTSD, or complex PTSD from, that means instead of regular PTSD, where, let's say a veteran has a big, they go to war and they have a big, huge traumatic one event that happens. For me, it was a number of events stacked that was
Right.
continuous throughout the years to gain that diagnosis. And then an emotional traumatic brain injury. So over time, I really got dysregulated. And chronic sympathetic overdrive, you have to look at the polyvagal theory here. The vagus nerve is what connects our gut and our brain. And I like to say it branches off and it sings little love songs to our thyroid and our thymus and our heart and our gut, and all the way down to our small intestines. And so if it's dysregulated, you kind of get maybe some heavy metal songs stuck in there instead of a beautiful love song every now and then, which really dysregulates the autonomic nervous system. And so I went past flight or fight, which I think is where most America is, into freeze.
Yeah.
And I didn't even recognize it in myself. And I'm a doctor. Didn't even recognize it. And that's because what that feels like is kind of cocooning. You feel safe in your everyday, day-to-day habits. But then if you go beyond that and something abrupt comes up, you really can't handle it. You can't. It's too stressful. And sometimes watching hours of a marathon of a show is what I needed when I was in freeze. Seriously.
Right. Yeah. So you're shutting off, really.
Shutting off. You're dissociating.
Yeah.
Yep. And sometimes that was hours of scrolling. So I had to really catch myself, and what that did, that chronic stress, that feeling like you're always walking on eggshells, I started to dump minerals out of my kidneys over time. Things like sodium, things like potassium, things like magnesium. I know super deficient in magnesium too, which runs over 300 enzymatic reactions in the body.
Yeah. No, 100%. Yeah, if
Super
you're
important.
gonna, for sure. But then there's also the trace minerals. There's all the stuff underneath that, and I think this is a really interesting conversation because there's a lot of voices out there right now saying, no, you don't need magnesium. All you need are trace minerals. And then you get the magnesium people saying, all you need to, and I don't know that they're saying all you need to do, but they're just pushing magnesium. And I think what's getting missed is that you need both. You need to lay that foundation of trace minerals, and then you may need to punctuate certain minerals on top of that.
Yes.
So both are true.
I love that. And I actually recently, within the last couple months, started taking a brand that I love that has really, really, really high dose trace minerals. Because they think you need more than the RDA even. And I can't tell you how much that has regulated me. Just things like chromium, cobalt, magnesium, chromium, if I already said chromium, boron, selenium, iodine, just things like this.
Molybdenum. All the little bitty
that
ones
too.
Nobody talks about, right?
That too. It's in there as well. And it has made a world of difference for me. I mean, I'm sleeping like a baby. All my hot flashes are gone. My cycles are regulated, whereas they weren't before when I was super stressed out. When that's common. But how can your delicate symphony of hormones be normal and your cycle be normal when you are stressed out? It can't, ladies. It cannot. So, I was experiencing all that, and my clients and patients have experienced. And that's really, I knew that the first step was nervous system regulation, but I didn't know how to do it myself. I didn't know. Yeah. And I needed to change my toxic situation, and I needed to remineralize, and I needed to find my center again in silence. And that is where the dark night of the soul is, because it's really about, I needed to wallow around in a pillow and cry a little bit. I needed to stop scrolling and feel my emotions. And nobody wants to do that.
No, nobody wants. Scrolling is way more fun than that.
Yes, totally. So that was me. I became one of my own clients, or one of my own patients that I see. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it is remarkable, right, that as a practitioner, we're sometimes the worst equipped to help ourselves. right? You can't see the forest for the trees. As you said, you've referred to your friends, and you have a pretty high powered collection of friends. Like you mentioned Kelly Kennedy, like you have a very high powered collection of friends who are incredibly knowledgeable practitioners themselves. And they can present to you an image of what you don't even realize is what you're living right now, because you're in so deep. And I think that this is where, where all the people that we end up reaching through podcasts or social media. And I commend people who are really trying to go it alone, but I would encourage people, if you're stuck, you probably need someone to walk with you, to reflect back to you what it is that they're seeing, so that you can get, let's say, a different point of view.
1,000%. And when I was dysregulated, it was really hard for me to hear, because you're already kind of irritated. You're already down on yourself. There's probably some shame there. And then people close to you are saying, oh, you got some work to do. But it's what I needed to hear. Yeah. Who are you talking to? Yeah.
What kind of friend are you anyway?
It's literally how I felt back then, though. I know it sounds so ridiculous and I'm making fun of myself now, but I literally could not handle it because of my stress before. So it's just a world of difference now that I found my own personal recipe, and I feel even better equipped to help others.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. How has this changed the way that you work with people? Because like you said, you were the detox doctor. You were locking people in saunas for hours on end to just go detox, which is, look, I myself, I have an infrared sauna. It's my BFF. But at the same time, we need to understand how to use it properly, and how to support our bodies in terms of what's happening and replenish what gets lost. So how has this changed the way, like this kind of trial by fire and personal journey? Really, I'm sure, like, it's made you sit back and go, okay, how am I bringing this into my practice with my patients?
For sure. I'm actually revamping my whole platform, Wellness Plus, now for this. So I can have even a more personalized handheld experience for people, because the first step really is looking for nervous system dysregulation. If people are off balance, off kilter in their autonomic nervous system between parasympathetic versus sympathetic, no protocol is going to stick until you regulate your nervous system. I can't, and so I'm going to be wasting people's time and money, and I really hate to do that. So I want to make sure that I'm as efficient as I can be, even if it's pulling the reins back on people who are ready to just go with a detox. Sometimes people come to me, they're already on killers, they're already on binders. I'm like, wait a second, you can't even regulate your mood throughout the day, and you're like pulling things out with binders. So let's first remineralize, because that was a key step for me. And then we can open drainage. And then if you still need it, we can detox. But sometimes people don't need it when you open them up and you regulate them properly.
Yeah. Well, the body has its systems, right? It has detoxification systems. What can we do to bring those systems back on board and maybe support them?
Right.
And I think and it's funny, the semantics of detoxification isn't, again, there are so many flashpoints in our industry, but it's yet another flashpoint, right? Because you get all these doctors that come in and say, there's no such thing as detox. The body does detox. And it's true. The body does detox, but sometimes the body's a little jammed up.
It can get overwhelmed. Yes.
And we aren't detoxifying the body. What we are doing is supporting those pathways so that they can function, which involves, to your point, the minerals, the methylated Bs, and whatever other micronutrients, I think.
Yeah, I mentioned histamine and mast cell activation syndrome. Yes. That is part of nervous system dysregulation. It's usually a type A, hard to let go of control woman that I see. That it's not. Well,
there's none of those around.
Yeah. Right. Not to stereotype anybody. It's like I'm talking about myself. But anyway, so yeah, I see that clientele a lot. And so I would be doing them a disservice if I didn't calm down that inflammation and that hypervigilant overreactive response from the body before I go throwing more things at it. You have to calm that system down and calm the mind and the gut-brain axis down first. And that's the beauty and art of health and medicine, is that it's a little bit of a bio-individual recipe for each person, because we're all unique.
Yeah, I love that. Sometimes you will find something that's worked for someone else, but those drivers are going to be unique to you and your circumstances, not to mention how you as a person responds to them, which we know is the stress response. And it's going to vary from person to person.
That's right. Amen to that. I love that. Absolutely. For digestive issues, food allergies, environmental allergies as well.
Yeah. And so, just to represent that to the audience, and that is that your nervous system regulation or lack thereof is going to affect how your body is able to respond to all of the stresses that are coming at you.
That's right. And until I can calm that down, everything I do to try to help your body re-regulate is maybe going to be seen as a foreign intruder. Until we adjust that nervous system, that hypervigilant response, that almost like overprotect. It's just a protective mechanism from the body that's trying to keep you safe. That's all it is.
Yeah. Well, and it makes so much sense because at that point, everything that's coming in is the enemy. It's just one more thing we have to deal with. No, we can't deal with one more thing.
That's right. That's right. That's exactly what it is for all of you guys out there listening. So that's really the first step in my program now, is to calm that inflammatory response down, make sure the person is in homeostasis as much as I can through minerals, through really supportive things, sometimes GABA, L-theanine if people need it. Sometimes definitely something like SAMe if they can't handle methylated B vitamins is huge for people. And I love SAMe for that. And then just trace minerals, as you mentioned, made a world of difference in my system. I can't stress that enough for people whose nervous system is dysregulated. So fortify, remineralize is first. Get out of nervous system dysregulation. Then we can move into opening drainage. So, can you go to the bathroom 2 to 3 times per day and it's pretty normal and regulated? Are you bloated all day long? Do you have brain fog? Is your liver functioning right? Can it process caffeine and alcohol? Can you fast? And can you break down glycogen to sustain your glucose in between meals? Can you sweat within 10 to 15 minutes in a sauna? Do you see undigested food in your stool? How do you handle fats? What's your bile? And your lymphatic system, do you have cellulite? Do you have lumps and bumps and things that don't drain? All this is really important. How do you sleep? How's your cycles? And so that when we start to make sure people are excreting everything they need to. It's going in, it's coming out. It's going in, it's coming out. Your fluids are not stagnant because stagnation breeds disease.
Yeah.
So, and then when they're opened up, guess what? A lot of you guys have dumped metals. You've dumped PCBs, you've dumped phthalates, you've dumped BPA, you've dumped some pathogens with it that are there to clean that stuff up. So sometimes we don't need a full-on detox for people after we've taken these very critical steps. Beautiful.
I love that. And the receptors are clean.
That's right.
Because a lot of those whether it's heavy metals or whatever the case may be, are sitting on receptors that now can't be used. And so even if you've got the hormones flowing, even if they happen to be around, they can't latch onto the receptor and create that response. So it's a real cleanup from the inside.
It is. And, if you're addressing mind, body, spirit at the same time, you're giving people exponential results if you can do all that for them. And really screening for roadblocks is super important because you're going to have that person who can't move on to the next step sometimes. There's always those people who are a little bit different and paradoxical. And so with those people, you have to really screen. Is there an infected root canal that's silent? Because they have systemic symptoms not right here at the mouth where the root canal is. Those things in the body, breast implants, root canals, they last 10 to 15 years because you really think man can make a foreign something that goes in the body lasts as long as your body? Ain't going to happen. Ain't going to happen. So, breast implants are at risk. Root canals are at risk. Mercury amalgams are leaching with things like hot liquids and hot food. Turn into a vapor that goes into the cranial canal. Where's the constant root cause in your body? Are you living in a water damaged home that you go home to every night that's constantly setting your immune system on fire and lowering your immune system so you're susceptible to other things like candida or parasites? Yeah. All these roadblocks need to be screened while nervous system and drainage is being regulated.
Nice. Yeah. So for people for whom, let's say, 2-hour long meditations isn't accessible, what are the, because we're not all there. We can't, I mean, it's a thing, right? I mean, I know people who do Joe Dispenza meditations every single day. They're up at some ungodly hour. They spend like an hour and a half
I
doing the
know them
meditation.
too. Yes.
And I'm like, yay, you, not my jam. I'm not there yet. Next year will be my Joe Dispenza year, maybe. But in the meantime, there's other ways. And so do you have some tools that you like to offer people that are maybe not quite as time consuming, even though it might be the best time that you spend? I'm all in. But what are the nervous system regulation tools that you offer people that are maybe a little more accessible, that helps them to kind of get a foot in the door in that space?
This question is nuanced as well, because just like there is a bio-individual solution or root cause for everyone, there is a bio-individual choice for each one in nervous system regulation for what sticks and resonates with you too. And so there's not a right or wrong answer here. There's a lot of vagus nerve techniques you mentioned, like the vibration on the chest, the different vagal nerve stimulators that can go here, different humming and singing and oming and all the things you can do there. But then there's the more I love neurofeedback. It changed my life. It helped me so much. I can't even tell you. Hyperbaric oxygen chambers are really helpful too, to make you sit in there and not scroll on your phone. You just have to sit in there and breathe, and while you're getting hyper oxygenated. I really love some nervous system programs that people can do at home. I love Primal Trust with Dr. Kat. I think she's amazing. DNRS, Dr. Gupta. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. And then just breath work. You can even do some free breath work sessions on YouTube. That really helps you become aware of your body.
I love it. It helps you to stop, right? To slow down. Yeah. Actually, the one that not many people talk about these days, and maybe because it's a bit more involved, but because I have scrolled in an HBOT chamber, I'm afraid, I'm sad to admit.
Dang it.
That's where I can't scroll. Float tank.
Ah, you're right. I love that.
Have you done a float?
I love. Yes.
Right. So, I mean, you have to have one near you, and it's obviously not free, but these float tanks, this is water that's loaded with salt. Think Dead Sea. So you can, even people who can't swim, you can only float. Plus there's not that much water in there, but it's almost like there's like a tiny bit of water, but you're just floating, and you close the door, you're in the dark. It's funny. I don't even know. I don't think they pipe music through.
Not till the end.
Not till the end to wake you up. Yeah. And you lie there thinking, and you go in there and you're like, there's no way I'm going to last an hour in here. And then the next thing you know, the music's playing and you're waking up.
What? Where did I go? I don't think I was asleep. Was I?
No.
That's how it is.
You almost need someone to come pick you up because you're so relaxed.
You just got all this magnesium and you've been in meditation. Yeah.
And your nervous system has just been lulled into this like ridiculous state of mush. Yeah. And now you're expected to get behind the wheel of a car and drive yourself home. I just think that's not smart. It's as bad as being drunk.
Yes, that's probably true. Yeah, you guys, it's a sensory deprivation tank. So what the water does when you float, it's like you don't feel like you're not touching anything. And it's the same temperature as your skin. So it's not cold or hot. So you don't feel any sort of temperature. You feel like you're floating in space. It's dark. You can't hear anything. All of that you're deprived of. So it's sort of like you just like go off somewhere. I don't know. Yeah, it's amazing. So people don't talk about this enough.
No, I know. Pro tip though, use the earplugs.
Yeah.
I didn't use the earplugs one year and I got that water stuck in my ear. I was deaf in one ear for a month until I went to see a friend of mine who's a pediatrician. And he said to me, okay, now we're going to try this one thing. If this doesn't work, you're going to have to go to an ENT. And he had this giant syringe of like, I think it was hot water or something. And he just blew it into my ear and it got the magnesium water out. But it was like, what you described earlier. It was like, oh my God, like here again. And
that sounds awful for a month. Yeah, he gave you like a neti pot right in your ear.
Exactly, but it was like high pressure. So anyway, the point being, all kidding aside, it's about tapping into different strategies. And look, float tanks, there's some people I've talked to who could not think of anything worse, really. But you cannot scroll in float tank. You will kill your phone. So, so the point being, tapping into whatever strategy or tool it is that's going to help you to regulate your nervous system or help your nervous system to calm down is going to be invaluable as you and before you start to throw new things or even remove things from your body.
That's right. I mean, when I didn't have any minerals, I felt very victimized. I felt like the worst things in the world were happening to me and woe is me. And I felt I couldn't let go of a thought. I don't know what lack of mineral that is, but it was literally just dysfunctional brain. If something bad would happen and I would get irritated, it was like I couldn't let go of that irritation.
Perseveration.
Yes, there you go.
Great word.
Yes.
Love that word.
That's right. Exactly what it was. I had a little bit of a hyper-reactive brain because when they took me into the brain center and I was clapping on the cowbell on the exact second in the interactive metronome, I was always a split second early, which shows a reactive brain. So lack of minerals really kind of changed my personality that way. And I just want people to be able to recognize that. And, it could be perimenopausal symptoms and it's mixed in there with it as well. Yeah. So
yeah, 100%.
Yep. So.
Well, this is great.
Yes.
It's been a great conversation. Is there any stone you wanted to kind of peer under that we've left unturned for this one, or are you feeling like we've kind of traveled our road here?
I feel like I gave people a pretty good roadmap about how to look for what's going on in their bodies and how to heal. But don't give up, guys. I want to leave everyone with a pretty positive message. Don't give up. I feel like that if you feel like you're the one hopeless case and no doctor has been able to figure you out, just remember that you are your own best doctor. The answers are inside you. And if you can calm your nervous system, you can sometimes figure that out or have a guide help you figure it out easier. And I think that just because you haven't figured it out doesn't mean it won't happen. Yeah. And so always stay positive. Always believe that and envision yourself already healed. Don't attach to a label.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that message. And start with supporting your nervous system and getting balanced. But I do think you will have an easier time of that if you're able to find someone to do some of the testing to find out what are those big red flag deficiencies that need to be replenished so that it'll just be easier for you. Yes. Right? There will be fewer seeming roadblocks along the way.
That's right.
And maybe I think what I heard in this episode a little bit is do less.
Exactly. Just be. It. You're a human being, not a human doing.
Yeah. Right. I love it. Dr. Jess, you're the best. Where do people find you and get more of all of this juiciness?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Nat. So there's different hierarchies here. So you guys, I'm very active on social media. You can follow me at Instagram at dr.jess.md. You can also follow me on Facebook or TikTok, same names. And then if you want you like to read, you like blogs, then I have a website, drjessmd.com, with a lot of different information on there about how to get to the root cause of your health problems plus more. I answer some FAQs from my audience on there as well. And then if you want an even higher hierarchy to finding me, there's my platform and membership called Wellness Plus. It's app.drjessmd.com. And there we have an uncensored community forum where 3 different doctors answer you, hand-holding protocols, and even a little vetted store. So it's really cool.
Love it. Yeah. Thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure. And I look forward to our next conversation very much.
Thank you so much, Nat, for having me.